Happy New Year, Substack, and podcast listeners. That's right, I just set up a podcast feed for all of the voice notes, and so I guess I'm going to have to be mindful of that. I'm not just speaking to Substack anymore. This is kind of exciting. So for anybody who's new to these voice notes, I'm Bella. I am the creator of The Healthy Voice, and I am what you would call a trauma-informed voice coach. I'm a classically trained singer, and I teach voice lessons, and I take the approach that most of our vocal problems are the result of tension built up through years of stress and difficult situations. I've never had a voice teacher who taught me like this. And once I cracked the code between trauma, tension, and voice problems, my own voice began to soar in a way I just wish I could have had access to back when I was a teenager as a voice student at a very competitive and intense arts high school. I did pretty well, but I think I would have done so much better. I really think my life would have been different if I had had these methods back then, and that's why I launched The Healthy Voice. And I'm excited to announce to you guys that I have a new course in the works. I just set up the whole outline, and I started, I set up a landing page, and there's going to be a brief moment in time for a few days where you'll be able to order it at over 50% off the price. So the launch price will be $97, but early pre-orders will only be $47. And the course is called The Voice Liberation Method. And it's all about everything that I talk about, liberating the voice so that you can be free. But anyway, I want to get to some more interesting stuff. Just be on the lookout for my emails. I'll announce it soon, and you'll be able to take advantage of this offer. I think another bonus real quick, just before I start talking about other stuff, is people who pre-order it will get 1 free month of the foundation level for my community. So you'll get access to the course, and you'll also get a chance to experience the community for free for a month, and then you can decide if you stick around or not. So I was trying to reflect on some of the things that I've been learning, and this week I posted a video about victimhood versus being on a healing path. And I even did a voice note that I published here as well. And I knew it was going to be interesting to see the responses. And I was really happy to see that 99% of the replies were empowerment replies, just very much on board with what I was talking about. There were really only, I can actually recall them. There were so few comments that were a little defensive and a little bit very protective of their victimhood. And one of these comments in particular made me think a little bit about, I wonder why some people get stuck in victimhood, or I wonder what may be misunderstood when I say this. And I started thinking about it, and I realized it has to do with grief. I think that it's normal to go through a grieving process, and you may even be stuck in a grieving process for a very long time that can feel like victimhood only because you're struggling to get out of the grief. But I think grief is normal, and I think that if you are prone to moments where you feel grief, or you get triggered and you feel grief about the things that happened in your past, I think it's healthy to feel those feelings, and I don't think that you should repress them. I don't think repression is ever a good idea. Victimhood, though, that's when you start to enjoy the feeling of grief. And there are people like that. And I don't know, maybe you've experienced that at one point in your life. I have felt that way. I have experienced moments where I almost romanticized my grief. I felt like the sad girl was a part of my identity, and there was a part of me that felt very connected to sadness and grief. And zooming out, I would say that because of that comfort with grief and that lack of interest in actually moving forward, I would say that I was stuck in a state of victimhood. But grief is normal. And the thing about complex trauma is that I don't know if it ever goes away. I'm not sure. I know from my own experience, it gets a lot easier with time and with practices and being vigilant about your healing path. It does get easier, and you can change the way you think about things. You can change your patterns, your mental patterns. You can change your perspective. You can learn from your hardship. That's the most empowering part of this path, is figuring out how you benefited from the trauma. How did it actually help you? Because that's a real thing. And anybody who gets defensive and doesn't want to address that, I think there might be tiptoeing on that line of between victimhood and just normal grief. You know, I don't feel defensive about the things that I grieve. I still grieve a lot. And I just posted, actually, I just wrote an article last night. I was very inspired. I stayed up really late, after the new year, and I was playing music. I was playing piano, and I don't know why, but I started thinking about my dad. And my dad is a huge source of the trouble that I've experienced in my life. And I have a lot of mixed feelings about him. And one thing that never seems to go away is intense grief and sadness over the loss of that connection. And there's a song that I play that I love, and I think of him when I play it. It's the MASH theme song. And I know a lot of you have heard that song. And if you haven't heard it, it means you're probably really young. But for anybody over the age of 40 at least, I'm going to say, you grew up seeing MASH on TV. And whether it was reruns or it was brand new, everybody knows that theme song. And I play it a lot. Because I think it's a beautiful song, first of all, and it reconnects me to the sadness that I feel when I think about my dad. And I go into a little more detail about why this is, and I'll post this essay soon. But essentially, here's why. So my dad was a Vietnam veteran, and his whole life was defined by this experience. And I would say ruined by it, but that's a victim-y thing to say. But I would say that it seemed to me that was the way he and my mother felt about his experience, that it ruined his life. And there were a lot of really awful things that I witnessed, and a lot of struggles that I had to endure because of his behavior and his inability to cope with the horrors that he had experienced in his year in Vietnam. And so I don't recall the moment I learned this. I just know that throughout my whole upbringing, I knew to never let the MASH theme song begin. Meaning, I used to watch the Brady Bunch every day after school. Right after the Brady Bunch, MASH came on. And I have a visceral memory of, I didn't have a remote control, So I had to, get up manually to change the channel. I have a visceral memory of leaping off of the sofa, bolting to that television and changing the channel as fast as I could. I didn't care where I landed. I just had to change the channel before the theme song to MASH came on. I'm getting I'm feeling my throat, my breath shorten, and I need to. So this is a good example of when you start to feel this way, recognize it, and then slow down, breathe in. I'm going to do that right now. I'm going to breathe for a moment. As I was reliving that memory, I could feel my heart starting to race. And there was a real fear in me that if the MASH theme song came on and my dad heard it, that was where I don't know. I don't know what happened. Something must have happened. I have no memory of it. And it never happened again because I was so vigilant. I made sure that it was never on. And I think maybe there was one time I slipped, my attention slipped, and I started to hear the opening notes. And it took me a moment before I realized I had spaced out. And I bolted to the TV and I changed the channel. And I remember looking around and I was so relieved to know that he was not anywhere nearby. He was definitely not within earshot, because even if he had been in the other room, I was afraid of what would have happened. And I don't know what would have happened, but I know that I was scared. And so I play that song a lot because I understand now. I have more understanding of what PTSD is. I have a lot of compassion for Vietnam veterans, for what they went through, the things they were forced to do, and the way so many of them were mentally punished for the rest of their lives. And I play that song as a way to, I guess, connect with the compassion that I feel for my dad, and also the grief that I have not gotten over. And it's not that I'm choosing to keep it there. In fact, every time I have a moment where I relive these really sad moments, I feel the sadness, I cry, I let it go, and then I move on. And I always think to myself, I wonder if that's the last time. It never is. It's never the last time. I don't know. Maybe one of my hopes is that by sharing my story, and I'm going to share more of this part of my life in my series, Singing Through the Shadows, my hope is that if I continue sharing this part of my story, that I will heal it and I'll stop grieving. Because I've always felt very strongly that when something is very upsetting to you, the best way you can, well, there are two ways. The best ways you can overcome the difficult feelings is to do something creative with it, transform it into some kind of art. So writing the stories, writing the songs, and then be of service to people who have experienced this. And one of the things I have to say about growing up with a Vietnam veteran father is that I can honestly say nobody is addressing this issue. I haven't seen a single movie or seen or heard of a single book or anybody of the Generation X, or perhaps even the older millennials too, talk openly about what it was like to have a Vietnam veteran father or mother. There were also women over there. I've known people whose dads were Vietnam veterans, but we've never, ever talked about it. There's this code of silence that exists. And I think I'm only projecting my own experience. I think the reason is because in my own, and I'm assuming this is true for them, in my own life, we were not allowed to talk about it. I was taking a big risk if I ever asked my dad any questions. It was a huge risk for me. It was not a safe thing for me to do. I was very curious, but I did not feel comfortable asking him questions because he had a tendency to just blow up and become very scary. And I never wanted to take that risk. And so there created this code of silence. And so whenever I would talk to, or whenever I would meet other people and find out in a very casual manner, normally it doesn't come up. So I don't even know how I would find this out, but somehow it would come up. And I would kind of get the same feeling that it wasn't something that they talked about either. And I just kind of realized one day, I think it's just easier if none of us talk about it. But now, of course, my whole thing is saying or expressing what couldn't be said, because when you don't talk about things that are difficult, they end up getting lodged into your body and they stunt your ability to express. And so my hope is that by sharing my story, I will help other people, help them to start to reflect on what it was like for them, because I know that my story is not the only one. A lot of people my age grew up with this kind of parent, and I know it had an effect on them. I know it did. And maybe they haven't even considered that it had an effect on them, or maybe they have thought about it, but there was no where to go with that information. And so they just kind of shoved it down and just said, well, it is what it is, moving on. And so I'm hoping that with my stories and sharing the songs that I wrote during those years when I was still a teenager, living at home, feeling so much anger and anguish and despair and confusion and like crazy myself, I'm hoping that I can reach other people and give them somewhere to launch as well, somewhere to go with their own questions about how it affected them. And I don't know, give them a voice, maybe give them some inspiration to do something with it. I know I would love to hear from other people. If you feel comfortable, it is a very sensitive thing, but if it's something that you do feel comfortable sharing in the comments, I would love to start a conversation on this topic. Anybody who had a Vietnam veteran parent, and, it really doesn't have to be Vietnam. It could have been Korea or Iraq, Afghanistan. I know that it's a similar dynamic. So anyway, that was my experience, feeling a recurring feeling of grief last night while I played the MASH theme song on my piano, feeling it, crying, and then letting it go. I got the tears out, I sang, I played the piano, and I felt good afterwards. And I think that's what it takes to heal long term. And who knows, maybe after I continue talking about this a little bit more and I publish these stories, maybe I'll finally let go of that grief. Maybe I can finally heal from it. Anyway, I'm going to sign off here. I hope you're enjoying these voice notes, and I hope you will check out that new course that I'm developing, the healing, the voice liberation method. And also consider joining my community. We would love to have you in there. It's a really cool group of people who get what you're going through and who are committed to reclaiming their voices. It's incredibly inspiring to be around them. Seriously, it's only been a month. I'm already inspired by what they're accomplishing. So thank you so much for listening. Don't forget to subscribe and share this with anybody who you think might appreciate it. You can always reach out to me if you want one-on-one lessons. And I have all my links in the description. So check that out, and I'll see you guys, or I'll talk to you guys in the next one.